down there. So if you guys have questions, please interrupt me because there's so many aspects. I could lecture about this for 4 hours because so many things happened that night. And just a little bit about Sunrise. As mentioned before, we are a 692-bed hospital. So we're kind of in the hood of Las Vegas. We're on the corner of Maryland Parkway and Desert Inn, so we're just a couple of miles from the Strip. And we have we have every service known to man. And we are a level 2 trauma center. And you mentioned before about our ER visits. Our ED is a 52-bed ED that I see about 300 patients a day. So just remember also when this happened, I still had a full ED, even though it was a Sunday night, it was maybe only 3/4 full, and our hospital was completely full when this happened, which is a whole other story in itself. You can see how many activations we have, and how many adult and pediatric cases we see with our levels, with our traumas, and we usually admit, our ED admits about 25% to the floors. You can kind of see there our volume. We are a part of HCA, so we are the largest HCA ER of 176 hospitals. We have a trauma center. We are hopefully becoming a level 1 trauma center in May when we have our next ACS visit. And what's interesting is Dr. Jimenez there, he's one of our SWAT doctors from Metro, and he was actually there, and as we get into this, he actually had a CB radio, and when this whole thing started, he was on his CB radio and kind of was planning things before the victims even arrived. So looking at where we were next to the incident, so there's the boulevard. So our EMS system, as I was telling you, as a flight nurse, I also worked on the ambulance as a 911 nurse. So anything, all the traumas that are on the side of the Strip where that incident was pretty much come to Sunrise. On the other side of the Strip, they almost all go to UMC, which is our level 1 trauma center. So you can see then, that's where we're located, 4.8 miles. Desert Springs is a small non-trauma hospital. And then the level 1 trauma center was 6 miles. So we saw 212 patients. And so what you have to remember, at this concert, people didn't have their purses because you had to go to a locker and lock your things up. So most people didn't even have a purse. And it was like a 3-day event, so they had a locker. So when they came in, we didn't have a lot of driver's licenses. So we had a lot of trauma does. We can see from 92 patients had no ID. But it was fascinating, coming from Iowa, from a small town in Iowa. I'm used to the community responding, and you have no idea what kind of response we had from the city. It was completely amazing. And you can see how many physicians and nurses showed up. And what was really interesting, one of my lessons learned is I let anybody in, right? Because at this point, I'm walking into a nightmare. And I actually had a nurse show up in cowboy boots, and she says, "I'm a nurse from California, can I help?" She could have been a veterinarian if I let her help, right? I mean, she didn't touch patients, but note to self, make sure everyone who comes in has a nursing license or a physician license. But at that point, you don't think about that. You don't think about keeping track of who's coming in or who's going. You can see how many blood products we gave without one single transfusion reaction. It was amazing. And we had how many crash carts we deployed. So there's your breakdown. And he has the slides here, so you guys are welcome to any of this information. But you can see the first 24 hours, there's all the surgeries we did. And as we talk about the OR, it was amazing because, again, one of the things that the Department of Health and Human Services have told us, because they've come and looked at all this, they have never seen pediatric surgeons work on adults, ever. And we have pediatric surgeons working on adult patients because we didn't have enough trauma surgeons, even though we had residents. We had pediatric ER docs looking at our gunshot victims. And we had so many anesthesiologists show up that they became scrub nurses and OR nurses. So it was amazing. Everybody just did a job. So that was all the surgeries we did in the first 24 hours. You can see our mortalities and how many units of blood products we gave. So there's the timeline. So personally, for me, at 22:05, I get a phone call from my trauma director that says, "Hey, there's something going on the Strip. Should we go out?" I'm like, "Go to the hospital." I'm like, "Nah, Sunday night." And but I called, and all I could hear was screaming. And I mean, literally. And I said, "I'm coming." And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't think to myself about the roads, right? Luckily, the road I take to work goes under the Strip, so I didn't have to worry about it. But when you have a mass casualty like this, you don't think about the streets being closed, because they closed all the freeways. now our staff can't get in, our doctors can't get in, and everything around it was closed. So we had to be able to, at one point we figured that out, and I had to tell physicians as we're calling them, don't take I-15, you can't get through, take DI or take Maryland Parkway to get here. And so then everybody arrived pretty much, not everybody, by private vehicle. In fact, when I was trying to get to the hospital, I was trying to turn in, and I couldn't get in the ambulance entrance because of all the trucks. And as I was trying to turn left, the trucks just kept cutting me off, and I could hear the victim screaming in the back. And I'm thinking to myself, I had no idea what I was walking into. And that being said, when I first heard about it, I said to my husband, John, I said, check the news, is something going on? He went, no. And I'm getting ready, and all of a sudden he goes, I hear 75 ambulances dispatched to the Strip. And I knew it was bad, because being in the EMS world, I knew that you don't just ship 75 ambulances anywhere. So a first private vehicle came at 22:25. Then the ambulances started arriving. I just remember when the ambulances arrived, there wasn't one victim, there was 8 to 10 in each ambulance. And there was no documentation, because there was no time. And some of my colleagues from the ambulance agency said when they were down on the Strip, patients were actually rocking the ambulances, begging them to be let in. I mean, it was just sheer panic, and that's the pieces that EMS is really having a hard time with, because they couldn't help everybody. And it was just such a widespread panic. You can see that first time we get the patients to ICU, we call internal code triage, and our physicians responded, our nurses, and our census is usually about, like I said, we see 300 patients a day in our 52-bed ER, so our census is usually 60 to 75 at all times. So we have 228 patients in every nook and cranny known to man. Talk about surge. This was surge on steroids. Then we discharged a lot of people, because just remember, it wasn't just the gunshot victims. There were people who had been run over by someone. They had scrapes. They were trying to help other people, and so it was. In fact, I will tell you, I think there's 30 patients we don't think we have record of, because they came in, they said, I've been hurt, they had just had abrasions, and they walked. They just left because they knew it was going to be too much to probably be seen. And we finally cleared everything about 6 o'clock the next day. And I will tell you, at 7 o'clock that morning, it looked like the hospital hadn't had anything happen to it. It was amazing. Our EVS team just cleaned, they kept cleaning it up, and that's one of the lessons learned too. You're so worried about your staff, you're so worried about the nurses and the doctors and everybody else. And it was heartbreaking to see our EVS staff trying to clean this blood up, because I'll tell you guys, when I walked in, people were slipping in it because it was just so bloody. And at the time, you don't take pictures, and you shouldn't. Number 2, you don't have time, and number 3, any video footage we have, the FBI has taken. So all our security's cameras, all the video is gone. So it's been which we get. So we can't really show you what really happened. So you think, okay, we all practice for this, right? Well, at Sunrise we practice for earthquakes. Oh, believe it or not, Vegas has earthquakes. So the first thing I did, so I get in there, and I will tell the story now, and I'll tell you what happened at the end. Is I'm trying to get in, I couldn't get in because the traffic was terrible, ambulances everywhere, and I said, I'm the director, I need to get in. And this gentleman says, ma'am, I'm from the Armed Services, I'll park your car. All right, I gave my car key to a complete stranger. More on that story later, okay? And it was a Porsche, okay? Even worse than that, okay? So, I was desperate to get in. So as I go in, it was amazing. Dr. Menez, the SWAT physician, had already kind of started the triage. So we had a physician and a nurse out in the ambulance bay, and I had probably 24 stretchers lined up, and they were just pouring out of the ambulances and out of their trucks. And they were doing CPR on the way in, and I immediately went to our trauma station. Let's see, I think I love here. So, does this have a laser? Do you guys know? Yes? Yep. I don't want to turn it off. There it is. It's not going to work, is it? Anyway, so the area in the red is our trauma bay. So looking at where that arrow is, it says create a staging area, that's the ambulance bay. All right, so that's where all the ambulances were coming in. So they go back in, they go into our trauma center. So we basically have 4 trauma bays, 2 are actual activation bays. So when I came in there, I mean, it was bodies everywhere. So immediately I started doing what I'm used to in the EMS world, which is the triaging for the start tags, and I had them all ready to go. I ran out of star tags. So I asked the fire department to give me some. So again, lesson learned, have a lot of those tags. If that's your triage system, make sure you have an overabundance. So then my doc's trauma surgeon said, give me magic markers. So that's what we're doing next. So as we're getting the patients in, we're filling up these trauma bays. And it was nothing but intubations and chest tubes. That's what it was, over and over. And we were flowing over so much that Dr. McIntyre, who I'd worked with at UMC previous, said, Dorita, I need the ICUs to become an ER. He goes, I want every single head that's intubated taken to trauma ICU, and I want every chest that we have chest tube in taken to cardiovascular ICU. So then I kind of got the transport team, as far as internal transport, to get all those patients upstairs. And I will tell you guys that it was nothing but, in those rooms, again, in each of our activation rooms, there was 8 patients usually. And all I'm going to do is intubate, chest tube, go. Intubate, chest tube, go. And you'll say, did you guys plan this? No. We just luckily had 2 SWAT physicians, Dr. McIntyre and Dr. Menez, who have done this before, and they've been trained in kind of like MASH medicine. So, in fact, at one point, one of our new respiratory therapists actually decided to sit down. He'd been there 2 months, and he had a bag of an ET tubes. He had the 6.5 with the sucks, with the VEC, with the succinylcholine, with the etomidate, with a syringe attached and tube ties. And they say, give me a 6.5, and you throw it at him. Give me a 7, and you throw it at him. And that's, I mean, it's amazing how people think in these times of crisis. I mean, so again, note to self, something like this, have those little intubation kits ready. Because guess what we ran out of? Succinylcholine, the paralytic agent to paralyze the patients. Etomidate to sedate the patients. We ran out of blood tubing, pressure bags, and IOs. So an IO needle, those you don't know, is the needle that you put into the humeral bone or the tibia bone to put fluids in quickly, because we didn't have time to put IVs in. So basically, any gunshot wound to the head or chest got an IO. So we ran out of IO needles. That was the other thing we ran out of. Because as soon as I got there, I said, get the disaster cart. Because I had a whole cart all ready for these disasters. Well, that was for saline, bandages, you know, IV tubing, all the things you use in an earthquake, right? Not in this situation. So then, at that point, we started filling up in the red area. So then we started moving the less critical patients who still need intubation, that's what intubations we did, back in that yellow area, which is the other end of my ER. And then at some point, Dr. Shear and I said, let's go, we got walking wounded. So we, I don't know why, by the grace of God, nobody in pediatrics, no patient went into pediatrics ED that night. So that became our walking wounded area. So that area, which is the green area, had a nurse, I had a few nurses in there and a couple providers. So we had PAs, we had NPs, and we had physicians as well, as far as, and residents. So, in the middle of all this, all of a sudden I hear, Dorita, what are we going to do with the morgue? And I guess, you know, I didn't read my disaster plan previous to this, even though I thought about it. It's hot still in October, so sometimes we have it so we can place patients outside. We have a locked area in our garage. We started placing patients in the yellow area, and it got too full because we had too many patients coming in. So I'll show you on the next slide. We ended up using our OR for the morgue. So they say, did you guys plan it this way? No, it just kind of all happened. Luckily, we just had a lot of people who kind of remained calm during all this and just said, okay, what's our plan? Let's just do this. You know, one of the things that we forgot to get was radios. So communication between all of us was a challenge. And that's, again, was lesson learned, have enough radios for everybody there. When you have 100 doctors and 200 nurses, it's really hard. But, and at one time, guess what? The cell service went down in Vegas. So we lost all cell service. But the nice thing was, we have an app, actually the nurses all have an Apple phone that has a communication system that's web-based, and they can still text back and forth. So we ended up using this, it's called iMobile, something HCA hospitals are putting in, and we did use that during the peak times, until the cells came up again. So again, then we started running over, and we actually had to use pre-op. So let's say you had just like maybe a flesh wound that was going to have surgery or have a washout. Then we started using the pre-op area. And the area that, let's see, I think my next slide's the morgue. So there's the morgue, okay? So that was our endoscopy unit. So we ended up clearing out all the equipment, and we put in, we had, I think, about 10 DOAs at first. So one of the things you have to be so careful of when it comes to this is the right people to put in the morgue, because we didn't think about that, and we ended up putting some peds ICU nurses end up voluntary to go in the morgue, but they really had a hard time with this. That's not what they're used to. I mean, it was wonderful, but they had a lot of problems with PTSD afterwards because, you know, again, they've dealt with death in the PICU, but this was something they just weren't prepared for, as none of us were. So at this point, then we put a security guard out there, and every deceased patient had to be in that area. The only time we made an exception was a Metro officer, Charles Hartfield, had passed. He was at the concert, and we put him in the pre-op area so his wife and family could visit. And again, you have to understand, no family member could see their loved one. End of story. The FBI, the coroner said no, they cannot see their family member. And that was so hard for us because we had to go tell everybody, I'm sorry, you know, your son has passed, but you can't see them until the coroner clears. So that was like 2 or 3 days later. Yeah, so that was really hard. So Mr. Hartfield then was across the way, and after his wife came, this is probably the first time I broke down. They had probably 12 police officers come in and took his body, and they did a procession out to the vehicle. That was hard. I mean, that was heartbreaking. So again, one of the things that, again, blood bank, we had to make sure we had enough units, because guess what? Then all of a sudden, the city the next morning started giving blood, but guess what? Blood expires quickly, right? So we didn't need people to give blood the next day. Think about having the Red Cross work on it, schedule it out, because we didn't run out of blood, but it was close, because that was just our hospital with the 500 units, not the other hospitals. The environmental services, again, we talked about that. When I started running out of supplies, so when I got there's 2 things I immediately did. I thought to myself, all right, what are my nurses going to document on? And we have Meditech, and if you don't know what Meditech is, you don't want to, right? It's a DOS-based system, so it's a nightmare, but it's a powerful system. And I said, all right, I want every single patient to have a trauma TriFlow. And in our world, the trauma TriFlow is just it just folds out, you can just write on it. So I thought, nurses can just write on it. It made my nurses who weren't trauma nurses panic. So what I should have done is used our downtime forms. Just said, okay, we're on Meditech downtime, just go on like as usual. And so we did have a problem with documentation. We did run out, I couldn't find, probably had about 28 patients. We had a hard time finding documentation. And what a nightmare that is, because they want their records, you know, and they want their records for the FBI. So we did the best we could with the physicians and nurses trying to remember so we could document not a lot of the patients. The other thing I did was Pyxis machines. I've got like 6 Pyxis machines. All right, so do I unlock them and have a free-for-all for Dilaudid? Okay, I did. I unlocked all the Pyxis machines. I asked pharmacy to give me a tech at each machine so I could at least have some control. And because Governor Sandoval made it a national disaster, I didn't have to report any of my drugs being missing. So I have been some fun, happy nurses later, but oh well. They deserved it. I'm good. Again, what's interesting, so I didn't think about it. So I'm driving down the road, right, and I'm seeing ambulances, so I'm driving, which direction am I driving? I'm driving east. The ambulances are all driving down because you can't get to the strip and stuff on certain roads. And I think to myself, dear God, what have I gotten into? And my COO, he was the administrator on call, and he's calling me, get your something in here now, because he's in a panic, right? And I'm calling every nurse I can think of, just on my brain. All right, let me call my manager, let me call my educator, let me call every trauma nurse, and I'm illegally texting on my phone, and I shouldn't have done that. And here's why. Even though I got people there quickly, you have to think about having someone have the call tree to go aside, because when I got there, I had my ward clerk start calling, but guess what, the phones were blowing up. Because guess what, the first phone calls was the lab with critical results. I'm like, really? Really? But that's it. We started drawing blood on the trauma patients, then we stopped. After about 3 patients, we stopped drawing trauma panels. So I should have taken a nurse, taken the phone tree, gone to a separate area, and said, okay, who's working tomorrow? I still need them here tomorrow. Okay? And that's hard, because guess what? Every nurse wants to be a part of this. And I can't tell you how many hurt feelings I had of people who weren't called. You know, and I'd be the same way. I'd have been mortified if I hadn't been there that night. So take someone to go out, plan, okay, this is how many nurses we need, staff we need tomorrow, how many medics, this is how many I need tonight, and then make the calls. And some people have heard it on the news and just showed up. So that was kind of one of the things I figured out. In my can I say this? One of the things I'm used to, because I was a flight nurse for so long, so I called dispatch, and I said, I need every flight nurse and every flight medic here now. Because I had no idea, because I needed some people who were used to this. Well, so if you have flight programs around here, at times like this, make sure they can help. Because what they said was, I'm sorry, we don't have a contract with you, we can't send anybody. Okay, I wouldn't even thought about that. What? And it was interesting because a flight team was there, just dropped off a patient, and they stayed and they ended up intubating illegally and helping us. But so think about that, if you have those contracts with your EMS providers, make sure they can come in and help in times like this, and it's not going to be a problem or someone will override that. Okay, so now we have all these inpatients. What are we going to do with all these inpatients? Well, we doubled everybody up. So my CNO was actually in Hastings, Nebraska, taking her son to college. Now she starts driving home, and she's on the phone. She has all these devices on the phone, trying to figure out how to get patients moved. So all the house supervisors came, all the directors came, and we just started discharging all our, I don't even know how this happened, to be honestly. The ED patients just sort of disappeared. They all left. The patients upstairs, the hospitalists came, they started discharging. And for those that couldn't discharge, if we needed rooms, we doubled everybody up. And no patient complained. I mean, trust me, these were complaining patients in the past. Not one of them complained. It was a shock. We did not have to move anybody out to our sister facilities that night. And I couldn't have found an ambulance anyway, because they were all on the strip. One of the things, though, that, besides moving the patients upstairs, no patients came to the ED, except one of our frequent flyer Dilaudid / suicidal ideation girls. She came by ambulance, we cleared her, she went to the 7-Eleven and called another ambulance to come back to us for suicide ideation, but that was only one patient. So I don't think we had another patient probably again for almost until the next afternoon. I mean, the whole city just quieted down. I was in awe. Security is a contracted agency. Never seemed to have a problem, but again, I didn't know who was coming in and who was walking out, right? And at one point when we got there, they said there was a second shooter. So then they brought the SWAT team. So as my staff's outside, they've got this Metro with their rifles, automatic rifles, guarding us. And we got so full, we started putting patients on the outside, just ones that we thought we could take care of, just the abrasions. And they were nervous, so we brought everybody back inside. So don't put your patients outside if you don't have to. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't going to work because it was not a comfortable situation. We do have dogs as well, bomb-sniffing dogs, but they didn't help a whole lot, but they were there. So about midnight, all of a sudden we're like, the waiting room is full, and no one's even paying attention to the waiting room, and it probably had 300 family members there, and friends. So now it's like, what do you do with all this? Again, didn't have a plan. So my CEO, I think my VP of HR, and a social worker took the families to the auditorium. And again, you don't think about this, the family members now are covered in blood, right? Because they were helping each other. So now we had to get clothes for them out of our chaplain's closet, or we actually just put them in paper scrubs. But we put all our psych patients in paper scrubs, so it was kind of hard for a while. It was like, some of ours. So as we put them all down there, it was, now we want to make sure they have some psychological support, so we're trying to bring in chaplains and priests. We're trying to help, they all want to know where the family member is. And they're all sending me pictures, and I still have them on my phone, of their family member. So now we're trying to have people find them, right? And I can't tell you, probably 8 or 10 patients, we did not have because the family members kept saying, I know they were about to sunrise, I know they were about to sunrise. Well, they weren't, they were still on the strip. The bodies hadn't been identified yet, but somehow they heard they were with us, and that was another conversation that was really, really hard. So at that point then, I will tell you that trucks started coming in of water, of clothes, of food, and it didn't stop for 2 months. I mean, it was amazing, totally amazing that we had all this, everybody, I don't know who gave us all this, but they just gave us everything, diapers. They brought in like 12 pet therapy dogs. I mean, it just showed up without us even asking. So again, when I had to help Dr. Shearer help the family members that their loved one had passed, our morgue was on the other side of the hospital compared to the auditorium. And we didn't want to make them walk all the way across because they all knew what we were going to say. So you really have to have a plan to be able to know where you're going to share with the family members what's going on. And they all wanted to be with their loved ones. That was the other problem. We didn't have the room. So luckily, it worked, but it was really hard. Downtown was a hard place to be. Again, we had nutrition teams to keep our staff hydrated, and then HCA immediately deployed the veterans. The VA was a mobile unit who were used to PTSD from the war to us, and I would say that was a huge piece of it, because it's not just crisis counseling like grief. This was a war zone, and the VA was a big help to the staff. Okay, and this is not the end of it. I have some more. We're not being told to quit yet. What went well? Practice. So New Year's Eve, I know it's a shock, drunk people coming to my hospital on New Year's Eve. But I will tell you that the director of EMS and I, Sunrise created this plan. So on New Year's Eve, we probably see, 100 ambulances every day. I probably see 250 ambulances on New Year's Eve. And so we actually have a drunk tent, and we actually have drunk tents on the strip. All right. So if you're drunk enough that you're like throwing up on yourself, but you're still like not comatose, you can go get some oxygen. They make sure you're okay, and you go to your room. But if you meet other criteria, like your Glasgow's 13 or 14, and you're taking something else, spice or something else besides alcohol, you come to us. So we actually have a tent outside. So I'm telling you this story because this is our surge. We have a tent outside that's built up. We have registration there. So the ambulances come in, and I do this, and I'm like, I'm like, okay. I open the back door, Red Bull, oh God. It just tells me, you can smell the Red Bull, the scotch, the beer. And the patient goes on the gurney and goes through our back door of our ER, and they go back into pre-op, where I have a whole team of nurses just taking care of the alcohol patients, and I have a provider there. And then all the other medical patients go through my main ambulance door. So we're used to that surge. So we practice the surge, and we know how to handle registration. We know how to handle the trauma dose. We didn't do so well with our trauma patients as far as naming them with this event. Luckily, Dr. McIntyre had a lot of trauma experience. Dr. Mez, as I talked about, I had a lot of trauma experience. So the trauma part didn't bother us. That kind of, I've always loved Margaret Houlihan and MASH. I just didn't know I was going to meet her that day. We had a great trauma call panel support, great anesthesia. We had residents show up from our sister hospital in Mountain View. Both Southern Hills and Mountain View are our sister hospitals, and they started showing up with all the equipment that I was telling you I ran out of. We made phone calls, and they just started showing up with it, because we ran out of it within the hospital. We ran out of the drugs, we ran out of the IO needles, the blood tubing, etc. Again, bed flow, it was amazing how the directors just came and everybody started taking their patients upstairs. And again, like I said, the ICUs became a mini ER. So you had the head wound, intubated, brought up to trauma ICU, the triage kind of continued, and then they went down to OR. So it was kind of a little bit of a circle. Instead of trauma to OR, it was trauma, ICU, OR. And that was Dr. McIntyre's idea. Again, we thought we did pretty well for families. So here's some of the things. Again, communication mechanisms with staff. All right, should have had it, I told you about my call panel, I should have had someone singularly do that call panel. Medical staff, we didn't have to control because 200 people showed up, but again, we had too many anesthesiologists. But that's okay, like I said, they became scrub techs. I talked about my documentation that I should have used downtime. Registration. Okay, so we were naming everybody by names, Abby Trauma, Bruce Trauma, and we had one big list for registration. Well, guess what? When you give that to one registrar during your traumas, that's different than giving that one list to 12 registrants. So guess what? We had a lot of the same trauma names. So what we've done is we have named them after hurricanes, and we have 12 lists with 12 different names. And so that way, if it happens again, we've got this trauma list of these hurricanes, this trauma list of these hurricanes. And that way, we're not naming people the same thing. Registration. Again, we already had designed a surge policy, but I didn't have enough beds really designed, so I didn't name enough beds. So now I've taken, and I have every single area in those hallways around those nursing stations is named a bed. So if I have to do it, I now have a bed for even a chair. You know, and it was amazing what we ended up putting. We had 2 to 4 people in each room in chairs, and as my staff would go to take care of them, the patient would say, "I'm fine. Go to this one next door. She's worse than I am." And the patients just kept saying that over and over. "I'm good. Don't worry about me." One lesson learned is tourniquet use. We all know about the Stop the Bleeding that we have. The tourniquets used in the field were more venous than arterial, and they actually caused probably more damage. And what do you do about that? I mean, it's really more of teaching the public, using that Stop the Bleeding to teach people how to put a tourniquet on. And they were sharing earlier, you put it on yourself till it hurts and you know that's how tight it needs to be. But that was something that my trauma surgeons did note. Believe it or not, you have no idea what the media frenzy it was. Controlling the media to come in and say, not say, oh, I'm Jane Dixon's husband, I want to go see her in room 512. Well, he wasn't that way. He was a media person that just wanted to get upstairs. So you really have to have control of names of people. Who can go upstairs and see these patients? And one of the first people there the next day, Dr. Phil, Mike Willie, Dr. Phil. Oh, you know, give me Cooper any day, but not Dr. Phil. And he was there too. So it was, it was a frenzy for our marketing people to have to handle all this because it was crazy, and the news was everywhere. Like, and they were trying to get in the hospital, and they were ruthless. Some of the things that this is kind of what we think, and I don't know how to tell you about the calmness or the chaos. And I think as a leader, you just can't be. You can't be hysterical through this because A, it doesn't do any good, and B, it causes more hysteria. So it was just everyone was just doing the best they could with what we had. I have lost some nurses. In our ER, not everybody's a trauma nurse. You either want to be or you don't. Well, not everybody was. And it scared the bejesus out of some of my younger staff. And I think I've only lost a couple people. One of the things that I could have done better was at 7 in the morning when it was time for the time for us to go to the next shift. I didn't say to the mornings to the night staff, are you guys okay? How do you think it went? Because I was in the morgue dealing with bodies, and I should have now, again, if this happens again, which unfortunately probably will, we need to have someone take care of the staff, especially between shifts. Because now the day staff coming in, they're upset because they didn't get called. Why didn't you call me? And everyone's just kind of in shock. So that was one of the things that I learned. There's our pet therapy dogs. This guy's name's, it's terrible. The show Nashville, you guys know the show Nashville? This guy's name's Chip. He came in and sang. He was hot, but yeah, I didn't know who it was. They have nice butts in Nashville. One of our trauma surgeons. I'm going to show you, is that Anderson Cooper? Yeah, sorry. And then we got posters and I can't tell you, I must have 100 of these posters that everybody wrote on. And the one thing I did do well was I tried to keep track of everybody who saved it or who sent us something, and then had all my nurses, not all of them, but we sent thank you notes, and we had the nurses sign, because you didn't even think about doing this. And I would tell you, my nurses were fed for 2 months. There's a hospital in Chicago that instead of buying themselves something for Emergency Nurses Week, they bought us dinner and lunch. And it was amazing. Like I said, it was like being home again. That's our trauma staff there. That's one of our trauma bays that usually has one patient that we had 8 to 10 in. And we had country singers come sing to the staff. We had all the different groups from the strip, the Jabberwockies. We had everybody come. And I tell you, what happened, my staff literally cried, and this is going to sound really weird, but I got a phone call from Walt Disney World, and the real Walt Disney World, and the real Mickey and Minnie, and they showed, and literally my staff sobbed, and they gave us all little Mickey Mouse, and oh my God, it was wonderful. Mickey and Minnie came and they saw us. They came to see the nurses, and they saw the OR and the TICU as well. So that was pretty cool. And I know I'm going to go into some operational section overviews. Are there any questions right now before I kind of go into different areas of the hospital we could have done better, or that we did poorly? Okay. I got like 5 minutes, right? 10?
No, you've got a little more than that.
All right. Okay, so we talked about this with New Year's Eve, so how we get almost 500 people in 12 hours. So having those surge drills helps. I mean, it truly does. Having those systems down, whether it's Joint Commission, systems, that does help a lot. So do those drills. An active shooter. Well, we have an active shooter in our parking lot like monthly because we're in kind of the hood in Vegas. So, but that helps. So go through those disaster protocols. Again, we did not have the radios ready. We just we had practiced, we practiced putting up the tent if you need to have extra place to, wash down victims, but we did not have the communication. So make sure all your radios are working, have enough for everybody there. Our Incident Command Center was in administration, which is on the other end of the world, which is good because you don't get bothered, but it's bad because every time I had to go down there and I didn't have my radio, I had to walk down there to talk to them. And like I said, we saw 214 victims. I think UMC probably saw 100, Level 1 Trauma Center, and everybody else was around probably 50 to 60. Okay. One of the things, too, is working with incident command structure. One of the first things I did when I got there is I called UMC, because I used to work there, so I said, what's going on over there? And they're like, it's a ghost town, send us your patients. Well, it was so crazy in my end of the world, I didn't send patients because I wasn't thinking about that. I was just trying to keep patients flowing in. And in Vegas, we have a problem with divert. I don't know if you guys do that here in Michigan. So when the hospitals get full, they'll go on divert. And full meaning a lot of holds. And when you go on divert, that means EMS is not supposed to come to your door. Okay, so it's always, so like 2 weeks ago, in my 52-bed ER, I had 108 holds. Okay, it was my own personal nightmare. And that lasted for about 3 days. Then we went down to 80, back up to 90. Now we're at 30, and we think we're on vacation. But what happens is the hospitals in Vegas will all shut down to EMS when they have too many holds because they don't know the right place to put them. But we don't go on divert. So that was in my brain. But what I should have been thinking was, okay, is there any way that we can share this volume between hospitals so I'm not overwhelmed? Because one thing is incident command in the field, they would just call us on the radio and say, how many more patients can you take through our EMS radio? And I just kept saying 10, because that's what I was used to. Just bring them on. Just bring 10 more patients, 10 more patients. And at one point, we heard that UMC, the level 1, was on divert. Well, guess what? A dispatcher made that call, and UMC was never on divert. They never, and it was a mistake made in the dispatch center that they put that hospital on divert. So they quickly realized their mistake and stopped that. So again, when something happens like this, you've got to have communication between your hospitals, because how many times the patients come to me saying, I want to know if my brother's here, and I should have had a better way to call the other hospitals or had my marketing people call the other hospitals and check on patient lists. So that was a big part. With something like this, you just have to be able to talk to your competition, if you want to put it that way. And again, improving that if your cell phone's back, if your cell system goes down, you've got to have another way. An internet-based system, something to be able to talk to each other. Again, I told you that we're using the color-based triage, and I ran out, so now I have like 500 tags instead of 100, which is what I had before. The iMobile is what we continue to use, the web-based phone systems. And again, we just need a better documentation system, but again, to me that's downtime forms, and having those extra supplies for something like this. Again, we kind of talked about this with the trauma centers as far as just working with the other trauma centers on this with better communication. And it was one of the nice things is some of our Arizona hospitals are smaller, but they kept offering physicians and nurses. The next 3 days I get phone calls from the other small, like level 3 trauma centers. Hey, we can send you a doc. Hey, we can send you a nurse. And we didn't really need anybody afterwards, but it was really nice to see the camaraderie with our outlying hospitals. So of course the PAC system went down during all this. But the trick was, we just needed x-rays to confirm 2 places, but we really didn't do that. We were just looking for, for the bullet wounds, looking for injuries, looking, once we put a chest tube in. So they just basically had a mobile, and it was digital, and they just pretty much went around, showed the view, and docs went on. So we didn't really save the images, we just kind of all did it within the mobile unit. And at some point we couldn't get them read, because okay, now there's so many x-rays coming through, and the radiologist can't keep up. So basically they just planted a radiologist in all my areas, and the radiologist just read them as necessary. So I just kind of kept going that way. Oh, the other thing we had an issue with, everybody needed a CAT scan, and although we have 3 CAT scan machines, at the end there was a big lineup of like 30 patients waiting for a CAT scan. So we could have done better at spreading the patients out through all 3 CAT scan machines. Again, blood bank, we should have booked over 400 units. We want to be able to have a better TXA protocol, because we really haven't done much of that yet, and we're starting that. And again, working with the blood banks to make sure we have that overload if we need it, especially when we start using all the O positive. It's funny, lab again, we just kind of stopped drawing labs. It was just too much. We started drawing labs at the beginning, like I said, and all we had was critical results, and we just stopped until we had a better system when they went upstairs. But again, the docs weren't putting in orders either. The docs, we didn't have, everything's computerized order entry, so our docs had to use paper. And so we lost a lot of orders. So you really need to have a plan to be able to have that downtime system and a place that almost like someone to grab it from the doc, all right, I've got the orders, and walk over to lab or a radiology and hand it to them. Have kind of a system of transporters of orders, basically. Oh, surgical services. They were amazing. I mean, like I said, they turned over patients so many times. It was unbelievable. The problem was, again, when we had these trauma does, we had trauma does that were going into the OR without any type of without a name. That's really hard for them. And one of the stories I just heard last week when we were giving this presentation to New York City was, and that staff gets left out. So think about it, everybody comes to visit and they go to the OR, they go to the ER, they go up to the UNIS, and they don't go into OR because no one goes into OR because that's, sterile. So we started making sure that all these visitors and all this food started coming into the OR because they found out there was a gentleman who, I think it was day 2, he came in and he had surgery on his arm, his hand. It was surgery on his hand. And he said, I just wanted to thank you. And they said, oh, we don't remember you. He goes, yeah, I had surgery on my hand. He said, because when the shooting started, I laid down on my wife and I covered her head with my hands, and he shot her through the head. And shot through the hand. So these are the stories, still gives me shivers, that we didn't, you don't even know about these stories. I mean, they just keep coming out, all these horrendous stories of heroism out on the field. So again, one of the things that the Department of Health and Human Services came from DC to review what we did, they couldn't believe that the pediatric team stepped in like they did. So again, that's not something you usually see is pediatrics and adults co-mixing, but we did a really good job of that. Again, we talked about anesthesia. Again, the next day we had all these cases we had to worry about canceling, and again, you have to kind of think about that. You have the disaster, what's going to happen to those open hearts and those valves, and all the surgeries that are coming that next day, because we kind of had to cancel a lot and move a lot around. And you're not thinking about that on a Sunday night or Monday morning. We talked about moving the patients to PACU and post-op. And again, it's so important with the surgical patient to align your registration system. So you have that going before they go back. We talked about respiratory services. At one point, I had heard that we were putting patients, we actually coordinated it because we ran out of ventilators, and we're going to have to put 2 patients on 1 vent. And so our director of respiratory actually had it ready to go if we had to do it, but we didn't have to. So think about that to make sure that if you run out of vents, that you can, I guess there's a way, I'm not an expert at this, but you can put 2 patients on 1 ventilator. We talked about pharmacy. We talked about, now we added cameras over all Pyxis machines, just in case there's a diversion that I would have to worry about with the Pyxis machines to be able to help with documentation, because as the meds are being given, the nurses weren't documenting them. Because, I mean, literally they were throwing etomidate sucks across at them, and they would give it, and they just didn't document it. Or if they did document it, they document it on the arm. We had a lot of vitals and a lot of meds given on the arm. So again, make sure you have a documentation system down pat. I won't go much into this, but we did a great job of putting patients upstairs 2 to 1. A lot of patients just left. But again, have drills on this. Be able to go and see what am I going to do with all these patients in your hospital if I have a disaster? Where are they going to go? Who's going to come in and discharge them? The other thing we ran out of, I forgot, we ran out of pulse ox, we ran out of suction, portable, we ran out of chest trays, thoracotomy trays, and Mac and Miller Blaze to intubate. So at one point, it was during the crisis, and I hate to admit this, but Dr. Menez, he had a kind of a flower of intubation. He's in the back, and he's got all the stretchers lined up, and the nurse is ready, and he just said, okay, etomidate sucks, 2. And he had to wipe the blade, because we ran out. There's nothing we do. We had no blades. The glide scope was already used, and so we just had to manually clean it until we could get more Miller and Max. So you want to buy 500 Miller Mac blades? Probably not, but you have to know. At least think of a way to make sure it's clean. I'm sure it's clean fine. We didn't lose anyone, but still, you don't think about that. And that was the first day of our brand new SPD director just started that day, so yeah. Same thing with trace and transport services. We have a transport team that does this and just transports patients throughout the house. And you kind of have to have an algorithm for them as well, because when it's this crazy, it's just, you don't have a plan. But they all stepped in and they did great. And I talked a little bit earlier about EBS because, like I said, the things that my nurses remember is the smell of blood and steel. That's all they can remember. And when and you have to understand the way the bullets that he used were, again, of such high velocity that the patients didn't look like, these patients came in with a head wound. They were talking when they came in, and then they were gone because of the type of bullet, because of the yaw, because of the tumbling effect. It just caused all the damage inside. So these patients, none of the wounds looked bad. It was all internal. So the families couldn't understand, but they were walking. They had a wound right here, and they were walking. They came in, and now you're telling me they're gone because they just couldn't understand. And in fact, the Department of the Army's coming in over the next 2 years with, I think, $10 million. They're going to study all the patients in Vegas and all the hospitals and look at every single chart to try to understand, because nowhere in the world have they had this type of bullet used from that distance and that height. And so they're going to look at the effects of that. But again, EBS, just keeping sheets clean. Getting enough sheets, getting enough, and cleaning the floors constantly. Again, when you have that many fatalities, you have to have a place for it. And you have to have the right people in there. And guess what? There's no documentation again on these patients. They went right in because they were dead on scene, and then we don't know. Did the doctor do anything? Did they try? And they went right back there. So again, having that documentation system is so vital. Public safety, again, is just mostly looking at who's coming in. Make sure you can have someone sign in and see, show them a driver's license, a nursing license, please, and go that route so we know who's helping. We already talked about our communication system. We already talked about reg. We talked about the family. We talked about clothing again, or housing. This is the hardest part. So because of social media, and I'm 58 years old, so I don't really know what social media would have been like 20 years ago. And we identified bodies by tattoos. That was it. We didn't have identification, and a lot of the victims put pictures of themselves at the concert. And so we could see jewelry, we could see the clothes if you cut off. But mostly it was all identification by tattoo. Haven't got one yet. I am thinking of it, but. We talked already about media coverage, how that's just, you just have to summon more than one person to be able to control all the craziness with them. And behavioral health, again, it's all about taking care of our staff. And to this day, I think it's still tough. I know personally, I probably have my own personal PTSD for about 3 months where all the normalcy of the world, I could care less about ED metrics. I could care less if my boss got mad at me about something. I'm like, really? We just took care of 200 shooting victims. I'm over it. Back to metrics. But you really got to take care of people, because even a year from now, I think it's going to be, people will still be affected by this. And again, if you have HR, we used our HR department for family support. That's kind of where it's a comfort area for them, and they were great help. And lastly, we talked about all these volunteers that came in, all the food that came in, and you never say no. But it was a lot. You have to have someone manage all that. Because again, coming from a small town in Iowa, I didn't think Vegas was a city, but it really is a small town. I mean, it's 2 million people, but they stepped up. Any questions? Oh my God, thank God. Yeah. So about 2 in the morning, I went, what the F did I just do? I'm going to tell my husband, honey, I lost my purse. Honey, I lost the car keys. Honey, and all of a sudden about 5:30, somebody comes up and goes, is this yours? I'm like, oh, thank you, God. And this gentleman had parked my car, and he, some hours later, somebody goes, make sure this trauma director gets her car key. So, got my car key. Didn't tell my husband that story for about a month. I'm telling you.
I'm not ready to go there.
Yes,
How was your IT support during this incident?
IT support during the incident. We didn't use the computer systems. The phone systems didn't go down as far as the basic phones. It's a good question, because I know they were there, but besides, they couldn't do much once the cell service went down. So everybody just showed up. So I think they actually were helping clean floors, but yeah. Yes.
Numerous times about documentation, and it's so chaotic, and you're using paper. How are you sure that the paper documentation stays with the patient and not
Right.
your process?
That we didn't have one. So.
Or what would your process?
So it's for documentation to make sure it happened. Again, I thought I did great when I said, I want a trauma triflow sheet on every single patient gurney and every single patient chair and every single patient bed, right? Thinking, okay. No. So again, it was walk to me. In the future, what I want to do is go with my downtime form. That's just a basic piece of paper. An order entry form, documentation form. Go to the nurse and say, what's your patient's name? Write it down and pin it to their whatever, gown, shirt, clothes, and don't let it leave, right? That way, someone's always charting on it, and that's the only other way to do it. And you also have to have 2 or 3 people do it when you have that volume of patients, because one person wasn't enough. At one point, I even had one of my nurses go, please go find out how many nurses are here and who they are. And that wasn't even, I don't think I even got all the names. Yes?
So being a trauma center, did you enter all those patients into your trauma registry? How did you handle them from that trauma aspect?
Yes, and we're still entering.
So are you, like when ACS comes, will you have a plan on how to discuss that with them?
Yeah, because they're coming May 8th. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. Yes?
You mentioned that the families, that this decision was a few days later, but in the meantime, what did you guys do? Did you tell them to go home? Did they stay? Like, did the hospital handle that, or did the police come and handle the families?
So to answer your question about how we handle the families, the Metro was there as support, but they didn't help us with that situation. The coroner was there. We have a program called TIPS, Trauma Intervention Specialists, and they came and helped the families. But it mostly was communicating with us, and I kind of was the center of that.